I've shared my testimony before, but things have changed a bit since I last did my testimony, and I thought I would share about what's been going on over the last few months now. But first of all, I want to read out something that I probably read quite a few times over the last 3 months, and it's been read out quite a bit here at church. Psalm 103. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me, bless his holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits, who forgives all your iniquities, who heals all your diseases, who redeems your life from destruction, who crowns you with loving kindness and tender mercies, who satisfies your mouth with good things, so that your youth is renewed like the eagles. The Lord executes righteousness and justice for all who are oppressed. He made known his ways to Moses, his acts to the children of Israel. The Lord is merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in mercy. He will not always strive with us, nor will he keep his anger forever. He has not dealt with us according to our sins, nor punished us according to our iniquities. For as the heavens are high above the earth, so great is his mercy towards those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions from us. As a father pities his children, so the Lord pities those who fear him. For he knows our frame. He remembers that we are dust. As for man, his days are like grass. As a flower of the field, so he flourishes. For the wind passes over it, and it is gone, and its place remembers it no more. But the mercy of the Lord is from everlasting to everlasting on those who fear him, and his righteousness to children's children, to such as keep his covenant, and to those who remember his commandments to do them. The Lord has established his throne in heaven, and his kingdom rules over all. Bless the Lord, you his angels, who excel in strength, who do his word, heeding the voice of his word. Bless the Lord, all you his hosts, you ministers of his, who do his pleasure. Bless the Lord, all his works, in all places of his dominion. Bless the Lord, O my soul. So, there are times when God actually he'll put us through trials. You know, it says in James that, consider it joy when you go through trials and tribulations. And to be honest, that can sometimes be quite hard when you look at that and think, when I'm going through trouble, how can I consider it joy? But if you read on, you'll find that the reason that God does it is not to crush us. He expects us to pass the test because the trials are going to build perseverance, and they're going to build endurance, and they're going to build character. So that's why God will put us through trials. It's not to crush us. It's actually to build us up, because he never expects us to fail. He always expects us to come through the trial, because how can we fail if he's going through it with us? Amen? Amen. So, let me take you back to April the 29th of this year. Julie and me, I've picked Julie up from work, and we're travelling to the Beeley Inn near Bakewell. We're going for a few nights to celebrate my birthday. So we get there about 8:30 p.m. So we just go into the room, just eating sandwiches and some snacks that we brought with us. Next morning, that was the day of my birthday, the 30th of April, I'm sat on the edge of the bed, quite high up, and I was talking to Bethy on the phone as she wanted to wish me a happy birthday. Next thing, I'm lying on the floor beside the bed, but because the duvet cover was quite slippy, I thought I'd just slipped off the edge of the bed while I was distracted talking to Bethia. Thought nothing about it. I felt okay, and I was looking forward because we were going for a walk, and Margot will know this area really well. The old station on the Monsell Trail at Hassop, and we liked to park the car there and walk along to Bakewell. So I was really looking forward to that. So we had breakfast at the inn, we got ready, drove to Hassop. So we walked along the old railway to Bakewell station. Down the hill into the town, we sat on a bench by the river and we just let time pass by. Then we'd a walk round Bakewell, we had a light lunch, and then we'd a walk up the river for a bit before heading back to the car at Hassop. It was a really warm day, I remember that. We went back to the inn and we decided to have our evening meal a bit earlier. But I didn't really have much of an appetite, which I put down to the hot day. So I just had a salad, couldn't finish it. Julie was convinced that I wasn't well. So we agreed to come home on the Friday rather than the Saturday. And she insisted that I go to the GP as soon as possible. So I agreed. She managed to get me an appointment for later on the Friday morning, so we checked out early and drove back in time for the appointment. So the GP examined me. He said I was very dehydrated and told me to try and get as much down me in the way of fluids. But he advised me to go to A&E over the weekend if things didn't improve. So basically, to cut a long story short, that's where I ended up. I ended up at Fairfield A&E on Saturday morning, admitted with dehydration, but also an acute kidney injury. Struggling to eat properly, and a subsequent scan showed a partial blockage in my duodenum. I was put on a soft diet and encouraged to drink plenty of fluids. But another scan, this time with what they call contrast, it was arranged for later in the week, so they let me out to go back as an outpatient. But the problem with that was, because my kidneys had been weakened and they used contrast, I ended up with another acute kidney injury. So this time they admitted me again, and it was decided that I should have the camera down my throat to investigate the blockage. Didn't really like the idea of that, but I suppose it had to be done. And I just prayed that God would make it as comfortable as possible. The amazing thing was, as I was praying just before I went in for the procedure, they took me in, and I never actually felt a thing. Completely aware of what was going on, but God made it absolutely as comfortable as possible, just what I'd asked him for. The doctor told us after the scan he'd taken biopsies. He said it could be just inflammation, but there's also a possibility it could be cancerous. He told us they would have what they call an MDT meeting, where all the disciplines meet and they discuss what the best course of action should be. Meanwhile, I had to stay in hospital, get rehydrated again, and get my kidney function working. So, an appointment comes through to go to MRI, Manchester Royal Infirmary, because that's where the specialist surgeon was. So, I'm still in hospital this time, trying to get rehydrated, so it was a bit of a race against time. And we literally went out with a few hours to spare, didn't we? We literally got discharged, and then Andrew took us straight to MRI, where I met the consultant. And he instilled confidence. A guy called Panos Stafakis And he instilled confidence straight away. He just basically said, what I'm going to do, looked at the scans, I'm just going to slit you all the way across there, take it out, and reconnect your intestine to your stomach. And he said, you'll be absolutely fine. So quite graphic, but he explained what he was doing. And he said, we'll have you walking up hills again before you know it. Julie did ask the question. She said, what if there's something there that you can't see on the scan? And he was very confident. He said, no, he said, I'm sure it's all in that area. So he said, it'll be a dead straightforward operation. And we'll do it on the 26th of June. Well, that was weeks ahead. So by this time, it was getting harder and harder for me to eat even soft foods. But I was on all these different Ensure things and stuff like that. Protein shots, if you've ever had protein shots, they're the worst tasting things on the whole of the earth. But I was trying to get these protein shots down me to try and get my carbs up. And but I was losing weight. And so they decided that I would have a stress test, which is where they take you in and they wire you up to monitors and everything, and they put you in a bike, and you basically do all your stuff, and then the anaesthetist assesses you and decides whether or not you are actually fit enough to have the operation. So, passed the stress test. He said I did really well, absolutely fantastic. So we're walking out the hospital because Bethia was going to pick us up. And I basically got to Grafton Street, just outside the entrance at the hospital. And then I suddenly became aware that everybody was sideways, and it turned out I was lying on the pavement, looking at people's feet, thinking, oh, this is not good. But so I'd collapsed with no real recollection of it. But there was an ambulance just happened to be passing by. And these two ambulance crew guys, they were like, they hadn't even started, but they jumped out of the ambulance. They said, come on, get on the ambulance, we'll check you out. And they took me the short trip back to MRI, A&E. So guess what? I got admitted again with another AKI. So they rehydrated me again. And this doctor said, it's the bank holiday weekend. I don't really want to keep you in over the weekend, but come back to what they call SDEC on Monday, and they can check you out. So I did that, came back to SDEC, but I'd been struggling over the weekend, struggling to eat, struggling to keep fluids down. So basically when they checked me again, it was, right, you need to be admitted. And this time I was admitted to Manchester Royal. And that meant that I was sort of directly under the care of my consultant, Panos Stathakis. So, as I was back in MRI, I went on to Ward 12, and Ward 12 was like the specialist ward. And that was when I first started to become aware that God was really putting things in place, that He'd gone before me. And because there were a load of Indian nurses on this ward. And every time I spoke to these Indian nurses and said, where are you from? They'd say, Kerala. And big Christian community at Kerala. And they were all Christians. And I received so much encouragement from three of these nurses in particular. And it sounds funny, but these were their actual names. And it was Nina, Rena, and Vina. All the names rhymed. But particularly, I had to get what they call a nasogastric tube in, because I couldn't get any fluids to go from my stomach actually through my digestive system, so it all came back up. So they put this tube down my nose. The first person that did it was a doctor, and she did okay, but it never sat right, and I always had a gag reflex, and it was just so uncomfortable. And I still ended up being sick, and it wasn't really doing the job it was meant to do. So, to cut a long story short, that tube, when I got out of bed one morning, it actually came out. As I stood up, it just came out. So one of the nurses that I mentioned there, Rena, an old school nurse, she actually put a new tube back in. And the amazing thing was, I could hardly even feel it. It was so comfortable, and it really did the job. At this time, I was on what they call TPN. I was getting fed through my arm. I would be on that 20 hours out of 24 hours a day. But I would walk up and down the ward, trying to keep my strength up, taking my drip with me on its wheels. And I just felt that actually God's looking after me. But I thought, how am I going to get right to the end of the month before this operation takes place? Because the consultant, he had busy lists. He was trying to move things about, but obviously everybody needs operations. So, what actually happened was that it would be on the 3rd of June. I'm just going about my business, just trying to keep fit and everything. The registrar comes and he says, we're going to do the operation this Friday. This was in 2 days' time. And I thought, that's brilliant, because I've asked everybody at church to pray that this operation would be moved forward. I thought, that's fantastic. That's 3 weeks forward it's come. But then he said, you're going to be added to a list, so it might not happen. It'll all depend on how the other operations go. And he said, we need to get you to see the anaesthetist. We need to get you to explain what's going to happen. So, they arranged that really quickly. The anaesthetist comes. He tells me what's going to happen and all the procedure that they're going to do. And one thing that stuck in my mind was that he said, after you've had this operation, you will be in pain. He said, you will be in considerable pain. But he said, we'll give you a morphine pump that you control yourself to administer your own dose of morphine. And that stuck in my mind because that felt to me like it was almost a pronouncement over me when he said, you will be in pain. And for some reason, I just thought, I'm not having it. So I just said to God, I'm leaving that with you, God. He's saying that I will be in pain. I imagine there will be some sort of pain because of the major operation, but does it have to be considerable pain? So I left that with God. I'll come back to that later. And then on the Friday, the surgeon, he came to see me in the morning, and he explained the situation. He said, I've got this list. I'm definitely going to try and get you in. But you have to understand that it might not happen. So I'm like, yeah, fair enough. So just waiting and waiting and waiting. And then all of a sudden, Porter appears and says, right, time to go. The operation's on. So wheeled me down to the theatre. Consultants there outside the room welcoming me to his operating theatre. And he said, we'll have you fixed and you'll be eating again in no time. So, go into the room and all the anaesthetists, they do their stuff and everything. And then after what seems only like a couple of seconds, I'm back in recovery. And the nurse says to me there, operation's gone well. This recovery area will be closing, but we'll take you to like a larger recovery area, which is for the whole department. So they wheeled me up to this big recovery area, stuck me right at the end of it. And it was about 2 o'clock in the morning before they actually came to move me. Every other patient was going out to HDU, and then they got to me at 2 o'clock in the morning. So they're taking me through the hospital, and we get to the HDU, High Dependency Unit, which is right next to the Intensive Care Unit. Both departments work together. So they're wheeling me in the bed, and we're passing the entrance to the HDU unit. And I'm saying to the guy, that's where I'm meant to go. And he said, no. He said, you're going to the intensive care unit. And I'm like, no way. No, I'm supposed to be going in there because I'm not ill enough to go into the intensive care unit. The surgeon said I would go to high dependency. And he's like, relax. The only reason you're not going in there is because you're in addition to the list. There's no beds left in there. There's a bed in ICU. So he said, calm down a bit. So we went into ICU, and yeah, wow. There really were some poorly people in there, but they put me in a bay. And the night staff sorted me out. And then this Nigerian nurse, she came in at 7 o'clock in the morning. She was called MK, and she said, I'm going to be looking after you today. I'm taking over for the night staff. Now, once Julie had come in to visit me and we were talking and everything, and once MK realized that we were Christians, she said, I'm a Christian as well. And she said, I can talk about my faith now. And she actually started preaching over me. And she was just sort of saying, like, you know, you look around here, you will see ill people. And she said, you are not as ill as the other people in here. And she said, you've been given some facts about your medical condition. And she said, you don't have to live under the facts, because she said, the truth, who is Jesus, supersedes the facts. And she just kept saying that. She said, the truth supersedes the facts. And I thought, I'm having that. I've actually made a little logo, and I keep it on my phone. The truth supersedes the facts. The truth is always over the facts. So anyway, in the afternoon, they took me out of ICU because there was a bay for me in HDU. But I just thought, you know, if I'd gone into HDU, MK wasn't working in there. She was working in ICU. And that was why I had to be in ICU, so that she could speak that truth over me. And I thought, God, you're amazing. You go before me. So I went into HDU, and they're still pumping fluid into me because they're not sure about the joint here. They don't want to test it with fluid or food for a few days. So I'm still getting intravenous fluid. And my fingers start swelling up to such a point that I couldn't even hold my phone to text or to read my Bible. And got to admit, that got me down a bit. But the amazing thing was that two of the nurses that were looking after me on consecutive days, they were Indian nurses. They were from Kerala as well. So they were Christians. So they would encourage me. So that was brilliant as well. And then I got a visit for the doctor, and he said, "We're a bit concerned that you're not using your morphine pump, because they could actually registered. Apparently it was all connected, and they could see how many times I was using it. And they said, 'Do you understand how to use it?' And I said, 'Yeah, I understand how to use it. You told me to press it when I feel pain.' And he said, 'Yeah, but you're not pressing it.' And I said, 'I don't feel pain, so that's why I'm not pressing it.' And he said, 'All right, well, we'll take it away then.' And I said, 'Take it away if you want.' So one less tube to deal with. And he said, 'Right.' He said, 'If you need it, just tell me, and we'll bring it back.' And I said, 'No, you can take it away. I'm not in any pain whatsoever.' So he took it away. And then the next day, he came back, and he's like a little local anesthetic thing here. They called it a wound catheter. And he said, 'We'll take that away as well then.' So took that away, still no pain. So they're taking the tubes out bit by bit. So by the time I go back to the ward, and again, they do these things. On the Monday, they said to me, on Monday morning, 'You're going back to Ward 12. And I'm sat there all day. And it was 9 o'clock at night before I got to Ward 12. And you think, why do you have to tell me so early and get me all excited to be going back to Ward 12? But they take me up to Ward 12. And once I get back there, jokingly, when I left Ward 12, I'd said to Julie, can you ask them when I go back if I can have the window sort of seat, if you like, the bed at the window? So when we went up to Ward 12, they wheeled me back where I'd originally come from, right down to the bottom, and put me right next to the window at the bottom of the ward. And I'd only been joking, but I got my window location. But that put me across from this guy called Ian. And Ian had been there quite a while. He was in his 80s. And he was trying really, really hard. He was having a struggle, but he wanted to get his mobility up. And he was really, really struggling. But the fact that I was opposite him now, we could talk, because we were at completely opposite ends of the ward before, but I could talk right across to him. And he was sort of saying to me, he said, "I think what you're doing is amazing." He said, "You were walking up and down there the whole length of the ward before you went for your operation, while you were still getting thinner and thinner." And I said, "Yeah, because that's my God that strengthens me." And I said to Ian, "And he'll strengthen you as well if you want." And he was like, sad to say, he was, "No, I don't really want to know about God." But he said, "You inspire me." And I said, "Right." So I was giving him positive encouragement as much as I could. I would go over and talk to him. And he said, "I would like to be in the position that you're in, where you're mobile and everything like that." I said, "Well, you could if you would only accept Jesus," but he didn't want to know. But anyway, when I'd been back on the Monday night, the Tuesday morning, I got a visit from a physio, and she came and she said to me, "Have you done any walking?" And I said, "Well, not since my operation." Said, "I can only get from the bed to the chair at the moment. That's all I'm allowed." So she said, "Right. Would you like to do some walking this morning?" I said, "I'd love to do some walking." So she said, "Right, just stand up." So I stood up, and she said, "You don't need any help. I'll just walk alongside you." And I'm like, "But I've not walked, since the operation." She said, "Not bothered about that." So she said, "Where do you want to go?" And I said, "My initial target is because the toilet's at the end of the ward. I'd like to be able to walk there and back." So she said, "Right, let's go." So she's walking alongside me. Before I knew it, we're at the toilet door. And she said, "Do you want to go any further?" And I said, "Well, yeah, if I'm allowed." So we walked right down the corridor, right down the end of the ward, turned round, came back, got back to the bed, and she said, "Right, that's it. I can sign you off now." So less than 10 minutes, just the one physio session, she'd sign me off. So, and I said, "What do I do now?" She said, "Just walk as much as you like. When you get disconnected from your drip, go and walk around the whole hospital. Go outside if you want." So we did that. But the amazing thing through all of this was that I still had no pain whatsoever. The doctors would come round, the nurses would come round. "What can we give you for your pain? What's the scale of your pain?" I said, "It's nothing. I've got no pain whatsoever." "All right. Oh, well, if you need any painkillers, just let us know." And they'd go away. But then there was still, if you like, the problem that we had to deal with, and that was coming up. The fact that when I'd had the operation, they had found this extra cancer. And we were due to meet with the surgeon, all four of us, all of the Clark family. And we had a meeting with him on the Friday. Funnily enough, it was actually the day that the operation should have been, on that Friday. And we met with him in the outpatients because I'd been discharged by them. And I remember he was saying, like, "You have got advanced cancer." And he said, "We can't cure it. But," he said, "we can control it." And we had prayed the night before because we'd been having sort of bad news and things about my blood clot in my arm and everything. And that's a whole other story. I don't have time to go into that today. But we prayed for good news. And when he said, "We can control it with chemotherapy," we felt that was good news, because the other alternative was that they could just have said, "We can do nothing for you," and they could have sent us away. So he said, "We've referred you to this consultant at the Christie." He said, "She's a specialist in that area." He said, "You will be looked after really well." And I said, "One thing, I don't want man to put a time limit on me. I don't want any limits coming from man, because I believe that God's in control. I believe that God has ordained the days for my life, and I will leave it up to him because I'm a Christian faith." And Panos, the consultant, he then said, "I too have faith." And he said, "I have seen miracles." And he said, "I have a good feeling about you." He said, "You will do well with chemotherapy." And I thought, I'm going to take that. I've not mentioned anything about miracles. This is the surgeon that has actually mentioned the miracle. So I'm going to take that. So the next thing, we find ourselves waiting and waiting and waiting for what seems an age before we go to the Christie. But they didn't want to give us an appointment too quick because this all had to heal up properly. But we get to the Christie, and we got bloods done. We got to meet the consultant for the first time, and she was really honest. And she explained about all the different procedures that they could do. But she said the aim is to control it. But we said again, don't want any time limits because God's in control. And she said, I fully agree. So I thought, I'll take that again. And I went back the following week to get the consent form done. And the potential side effects for chemotherapy, the list is almost endless. And as I was going through the consent form, I was ticking off the box every possible side effects and just sort of saying under my breath, leave that with you, God, leave that with you, God, leave that with you, God. And I know it's early days yet, but I only had the first infusion last Tuesday, and I've been on the tablets Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so 5 days. But in that time, there have been no side effects whatsoever. And I've just carried on absolutely as normal. Well, as much as normal. Apart from having to wear gloves the first couple of days if I wanted anything out of the fridge. Because apparently the infusion, it leaves you susceptible to the cold. And I can't, if I take a breath of cold air, it could put me into bronchial spasm. So I come out of the Christie looking quite special that Tuesday with a scarf up over my nose and my mouth. And when I got home, I've got my gloves for getting things out of the fridge or the freezer. But that's only for the first few days. The rest of the time, we've actually been out. I've been out meeting people for coffee. We've been out for lunch and breakfast and things like that. So just trying to live life as normal as possible. And one of the things that really struck me all this time was that something that Bethia had actually said, because with Bethia, my daughter being a pharmacy technician, one of the things that she did specialize in was chemotherapy drugs. So she was able to tell me that they really are toxic. They are poisonous. And that sort of, I just felt that God put the verse from Mark into my mind. And basically what it says, in Mark 16, verse 16 to 18, he who believes and is baptized will be saved, but he who does not believe will be condemned. And these signs will follow those who believe. In my name they will cast out demons, they will speak with new tongues, they will take up serpents, in this bit, and if they drink anything deadly, it will by no means hurt them. They will lay hands on the sick and they will recover. So that bit jumped out at me. You know, if we drink anything deadly, it will by no means hurt us as Christians. Now, I know I'm taking the pills orally, and I'm taking the infusion intravenously, but I was still sort of saying, God, that is toxic chemicals that are going into my body. That is poison. So I just said to God, I have to trust that, as it says in Psalm 139, that which is fearfully and wonderfully made by God, I just have to trust that He is going to preserve my body, like it says in that verse, that it will not harm me, but that these toxic chemicals will have a free hand just to get rid of the cancer. Because when I was fearfully and wonderfully made, that was not a part of God's makeup for me. He did not include that. So therefore, it is alien to what He has made. So I believe that the drugs, they can have a free hand, they can destroy the cancer as much as they like, but I'm trusting that my God will protect that which He has made while they're doing it. Because it's one thing reading Scripture, but if we just read it and we don't actually take it on board and we don't apply it to our lives, then actually it's almost useless reading it in the first place. So that has been a big lesson for me, actually, to really take Scripture and apply it and believe, because the truth supersedes the facts, and God's Word is truth. Another thing that struck me while I was there, I've mentioned some of the nurses, and they were obviously Christians. And those of you that are nurses in the NHS will know that it's not always easy to share your faith unless the patient actually invites you to share with them because of the policies. But once a lot of these nurses knew that I was a Christian, they would encourage me, they would share their faith, they would talk about their faith. But there was one guy who stood out for me, and this was a guy called Victor. He was Nigerian as well. He's not a doctor. He's not a nurse. He's a porter. And you might think, he's only a porter. But I want to tell you about this guy. That guy, Victor, did me so much good when I was in hospital. He took me to a couple of my scans. And after that, I would actually see him when I was out walking around the hospital. But he was so encouraging. He always had a smile on his face. He loved Jesus. He loved everything about family. And I could see when I'd pass him in the corridor and he'd have other patients, he'd be talking to them, he'd be encouraging them, and he did the same with me. He was just so good. Such an amazing guy, an amazing man of God. And as I say, even after I was discharged and I would go back as an outpatient, I'd sometimes see Victor on the corridor, and he'd see me and he'd be like, "How are you doing?" And all that sort of thing. And it'd be so good to see him. How's the family? And all that sort of thing. And I just thought, we sometimes think of jobs, and we maybe put them in a bit of a hierarchy and talk about all the important people. But I'm telling you something, that guy Victor probably did me as much good, if not more, than loads of people in the hospital, just by his personality and just the way he encouraged me and just the way he spoke truth over me as well. And he was really doing that job is what done to the Lord. He really was living out his life as a Christian. And that kind of brings me up to this week. As I say, I'm at the Christie at the moment. I've had my first infusion. That will be, the pills will be completed on Thursday. I will have 4 days off before it all starts again. But can I just ask you this week to remember me in your prayers? Because one of the things that they found when they did the scans, funnily enough, I've got a crushed vertebrae as well. So it's almost quite insignificant. I don't know how long I've had it, but it showed up in the scans. But the GP arranged a scan for me, a bone density scan, and that's going to happen on Wednesday. So this Wednesday, I will be at Oldham having a bone density scan to look into why I've got a crushed vertebrae. Then on Thursday, I will be back at the Christie to get the first of their scans to actually see what's going on in here. And then on Monday, I will be back for bloods, and then on Tuesday, it'll all start again. So we've got a busy week this week on Wednesday and Thursday. So if I could ask you to remember me in your prayers. But all through this, all I can say is that if you put your faith and you put your trust in God, you will not go wrong, because He will never fail you. I have had such peace right from the start of this. And you know, when it says it's a peace that passes all understanding, it is. Because I'm in a situation where really the world would tell you can't find peace. I saw a guy on my ward, Ward 12, and he had no peace whatsoever because he did not have God with him. He was an angry man because he knew he was dying. And he did not have Jesus with him. But all through this, I have had peace. And I have not had any sort of word from God to say that I'll be healed, that I'll be around for years to come. All I have is this deep assurance in here that I feel that God has got plans for me. But whatever happens, He is with me every step of the way. As Paul says, if I go to be with Jesus, that's a win. If I get to stay around and actually take part in what God's actually doing, the great stuff that He's doing here, that's a win as well. So if you've got two wins, that means you can't lose. With Jesus, you cannot lose. So if you want the peace that I've got, you may be not in the same sort of situation that I'm in, but everybody will have some kind of trial or some kind of trouble, because Jesus said, in this world you will have trouble. But if you want peace, the only way that you will find it is through Jesus. So can I just encourage you, if you've come here today and you don't know Jesus, don't walk out of here until you've actually met with Jesus. And there's many, many people in this room that can actually introduce you to Him. Thank you for listening. Amen.